Hi, my name is Professor Jennifer Nazarino, and I teach a course called Global Dynamics and Immigrant Entrepreneurship in the United States. My class has created podcasts on immigrant entrepreneurs, and you'll be listening to the challenges, successes, as well as structural conditions and contextual factors that have led immigrants to start their businesses both in Rhode Island and around the country. Immigrants own over a quarter of newly owned established businesses, despite accounting for less than 15% of the total population here in the United States. Moreover, 45% of immigrant businesses are owned and operated by women. The students provide a deep dive and intimate look into the lives of immigrant entrepreneurs. Hope you enjoy it.
Hey everyone, I'm Samani, your host for the Immigrant Entrepreneurship Podcast. On March 8th, I had the pleasure of interviewing Rishabh Singh, founder of Gradley and Brown Graduate, at his office. I'm excited for you to learn about his journey, so let's get straight to it.
Hey Samani, thank you for having me.
So I thought we'd just get straight into the questions. So I was wondering if you could tell us a little bit about you and what Gradley is.
Sure. So I graduated from Brown in 2017 with a degree in computer science. I'm originally from the city of Patna in Bihar in India, and I came to Brown for my degree. And I spent 4 years studying computer science and doing a bunch of other side projects and studying a bunch of other related areas, from religious studies to some performance art and so on and so forth. So it was a very wide, but at the same time, some depth of sampling of computer science as my choice of study. And then around graduation, instead of taking up a job or going for a more traditional route, I ended up working on Gradley, decided to take the jump.
Cool. I was wondering if you could tell us a little bit about what Gradley actually is.
Sure. So Gradley allows international students coming to the US to access all of the services they need in preparation of coming to the US, all in one app. And essentially, we digitize the entire immigration process. These services could include anywhere from getting your phones, getting your loan, insurance, setting up bank accounts up, all of these things before you arrive in the US, and all of it is done in-app. So you don't have to do any manual work, there's no paperwork, it's all done by us on the back end.
That's amazing. It sounds like a really expansive set of services and products you offer. But I'm curious, how did you actually come up with the initial idea? What was the story to get there?
Sure. So during senior year, as I said, I come from Patna. Around senior year, by that time, I'd essentially helped a bunch of students from India and a bunch of my friends and family to apply to the US. And so I developed sort of a pretty keen sense in helping hundreds of students, and literally hundreds of students, not exaggerating. I developed a pretty keen sense of what are the manual steps that you go through the entire process. And I'd also gotten a really clear sense of what are the roadblocks that people are running into consistently, the beginners in the application process. And I'd gathered that sort of experience actually helping them. And so being a computer science major, I thought, how do we actually, if I were to write some software to scale this, could I solve the pattern of problems that I was seeing? And again, the striking thing to me was that this wasn't as complex in some ways or as varied a process as you would think. It started to become apparently very, very clear to me that you could write software to solve this problem. And so that was a bee in my bonnet, so to speak, and I started to pursue that. And so I wrote a version 1, a prototype of that software that essentially allows master's students applying from India to the US to be matched to best fit graduate programs. And then it was sort of a planner type dashboard that would, in one click give you all of the deadlines and this and that, and you could chat with me through the app about any other questions you have as well. So I released that, and 100 or so people used it, and they paid some money for it. And that was going well until what I started to notice was that the very same people who were using the software started to ask me questions about, hey, so I'm done with the application process. Now, what do you think is the best insurance for me to take? Or which bank should I go to for the best loan? Or, hey, I don't know how to get a phone and I'm arriving on day one and, I can't get a phone because of credit checks and this and that. And so what I realized at that point that, wait, it's not just that the admissions are a problem for international students or generally immigrants, as I would later realize. It's that the whole thing, immigration is a full stack problem. And because they're outsiders and they're not really familiar with the context of this entire process, admissions is just one piece. And so that's when I started to explore other areas.
That sounds amazing. And I totally agree with you. It's incredibly difficult just to get all these services as an international student myself. I definitely struggled, and I definitely wish I had a service like this. I'm curious that you decided to pursue this straight after graduation. So why did you choose entrepreneurial route versus taking a more traditional and secure job, especially given that you're an immigrant yourself as well?
So I think part of it was that this felt like a really compelling and interesting thing to do. I'd always wanted to start a company, or at least do something valuable, do something sort of more independently creative. And I think that the largest factor really was that it seemed to me to be the depth of the problem was really, really compelling. Like, I knew that this wasn't Instagram for dogs. I knew that this is a very, very real problem. And just the responses that I was getting from people, I knew, like, they were genuinely appreciative. They were genuinely saying this is making a huge difference. And it seemed to me that, that's worth taking a chance on. And also there were, again, small factors that went into it, that people were paying money for it. So it's the weight of the idea and the weight of the response that people were sort of giving me, that it seemed to me that this is worth doing.
Absolutely. I'm so glad you are doing it. I'm curious, how do you think your experience as an immigrant has sort of influenced your business decision making? Or do you think there's sort of been any advantages or disadvantages with your immigrant identity with pursuing your business?
I mean, the biggest advantage it gave me was the first-hand experience, right? It's I can completely imagine
the problem you're solving.
Exactly.
Yeah.
The decisions that I'm making, or the design, everything, the ability to be able to just close my eyes and empathize with the user base, or the people we're essentially solving this problem for, is a tremendous asset.
Absolutely. So taking a step away from Gradly, kind of looking at the bigger picture, what difficulties do you think you have faced pursuing a career in entrepreneurship that you don't think an American citizen would have faced? And sort of building on top of that, how do you think the country could be more supportive of immigrant entrepreneurship?
Yeah, I mean, the obvious one is visa, right? And I was lucky that I have an F1 visa, and then there were ways to essentially, there's something called the OPT, which is optional practical training, where you get 12 months to work on, you can work at any company, or you can even incorporate your own company, but you do need a US citizen on the board of your directors and within the company. So there are a lot of complexities that are often not talked about, and might even be beyond the scope of going into within the podcast. Ultimately, the spirit of it is that if you're an immigrant, especially if you're starting a company, you are rudderless, so to speak. You need a US citizen to be involved in some way, shape, or form. The Obama administration, in one of their last acts was to create an entrepreneur visa. And essentially what that would do is that if you'd crossed a certain amount of milestones in the company, you'd raised a little bit of capital, that would have allowed you to essentially get a visa to stick around in the country and develop it and build your company, sort of on parole, so to speak, and you could keep getting extensions. And obviously the Trump administration, within the first few weeks of their coming in, just killed that visa.
Coming back to your business, I think we talked a little bit about how immigrants who come into America as a constituency are pretty fragmented. It's very hard to pinpoint or directly market to them, and I think that's a big reason why a lot of large companies don't exactly consider immigrant as a group of customers. Do you think more business should be created to cater to the immigrant experience, and why or why not?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, the question really is, do you think more businesses should be created to solve people's problems, right? And to the extent that immigrants are people, yes, the more businesses should be created to solve their problem. But I think there's a more nuanced point there in terms of, I think there's a giant gap in the market. I don't even like speaking in terms of market terms. It's just that immigrants are a hugely underserved population of people, and yet they're across all indices and across all metrics, they are exponentially more economically productive, valuable citizens of society and contribute to society and the economy. And so, it's as much a moral imperative as much as it is a business opportunity. And so I think, and there are very few spaces where those two things collide, right? And so I think in that sense, it's a great space to start a company, and for the good reasons, not just that, hey, there's this market that we can exploit.
Absolutely. And to end on a positive note, I'm curious, what is your bigger vision or plan for Gradly, and what motivates you to aspire for that?
So I think the bigger plan is, today we have much of the infrastructure set up. We have insurance, we have loans. We're working on getting a license for debit cards and bank accounts. We have phones on our platform. We have shipping. You can ship documents. So we have these 4 or 5 things already set up, and 2 or 3 things we're pursuing just get set up this year. As I said, debit cards and bank accounts. And the other big thing is partnering up with large regional real estate and property sort of firms to essentially also automate and digitize the process of selecting an apartment, signing the lease, no credit checks, and all of that jazz. So that's within the short term that we want to, for India to US, the flow of human capital, we want to control the end-to-end process, right up to picking you up from the airport and dropping you off to your dorm. Eventually, I would want to even, we want to really control every piece. So it's just a 3-click, everything is set up, right up to Bed Bath & Beyond populating your bedroom when you show up. So that's the thing to do, because again, immigration is a full stack problem and you need a full stack solution to solve it. And in some ways, that depth of the problem, which I can still think about and empathize with, and I know it's very, very real, that's what ultimately keeps me going, because if this works, I think it'll be huge for the world.
Absolutely. And then I think on the ethical point, it's probably just the right thing to do.
Yeah, I think it's going to be good for the world.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much again for being here and taking these interview questions with me, Rishabh.
Yeah.
Really appreciate it. And thank you, audience, for listening to us. We hope to have you back for our next episode.